Two dicks, wow.
Yeah! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast.
And having to go, yeah, but he did kind of do this.
What I'm hearing is you just want Tom Brady dead. Like, that's all I'm hearing at this point. You just want Brady
Well,
dead.
not anymore. He's retired now, so I'm good with that. I don't want him calling games anymore because, holy hell, he's hard to listen to.
Enough angry and, depressing from myself. Sterling, thank you for being able to sit there as my therapist for this episode.
Start the game already!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Coming a little bit earlier this week than we typically do it. Again, it is a long weekend, so we both had some time to do. Both are a little bit busier on the weekend, so we're recording this here on a Friday. But nonetheless, buddy, how you doing?
Doing good. And yeah, I mean, we're recording early, but I imagine it won't be out before the usual time anyway. You guys will probably still be getting this on Monday. But yeah, long weekend, nicer weather. It's good.
We are officially 6 days away from the 2025 NFL draft in the shithole that is Green Bay. I'm going to start that out right away. But yeah, so this episode, obviously, this will be the last episode we have before the draft actually starts. So it's going to be very, very draft heavy. And right before we went on, we were having a really good discussion about Travis Hunter, where I basically just kind of stopped us and went, all right, let's start the recording because this is all really, really good conversation. Yeah. And it revolves around Travis Hunter. And the conversation being is, I know both of us have difference of opinions on what Travis Hunter should be. I think... And this all stems from him saying earlier this week where if he gets drafted by a team and they only want him to specialize at one position and only have him one way, well, then he's not going to play for the team. And obviously, if you don't know who Travis Hunter is, he's the two-way wide receiver corner, plays for Colorado, Heisman Trophy winner, very, very talented player. And I know there are a lot of people that hold the belief that he should probably just stick to one and specialize. And then there's people more like me where I go, he should play two ways in the NFL. But obviously it's not going to be every single down he's out there for both offense and defense. It's going to have to be game dependent and situation dependent on which side he plays more in that particular game. And the conversation that we had ultimately revolved around him basically saying that, you know what, if you're only going to have me be a specialist, then I'm not going to play for your team. And we both kind of looked at that and went, good for different reasons. I'm in more of the camp of he should play two ways. You are leaning into more of the camp of that he should be specialist more as a corner.
Yeah, well, I mean... I'm fine with him doing either or. I just feel like he's wasting his own talent by not choosing a position and specializing in it. Playing both ways, great. You're going to be a unique player in your own respect, and you're going to do some great things. But I just look at him and playing both ways, his ceiling sort of isn't that high. Whereas if he were to specialize in cornerback, that's the position I think he should. If he was going to, I think he's got a ceiling where he's got the talent, and if he improved his ability with, man coverage, press coverage, he could be one of the best corners to ever play the game. Wide receiver, not so much, just because there are a lot of really good wide receivers, especially right now in the league, from Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, the list goes on. I think he's hindering his own ability to be considered one of the best to ever play the game at that cornerback position by saying he wants to play both ways. He's still going to get great accolades playing both ways, because he's going to be very unique in that way. I just don't think it's going to necessarily solidify him a spot in Canton.
Yeah, and for me the biggest reason, and again, going back to what you're saying, I can agree with a lot of what you are saying in that specific thing. I kind of said that in this final year at Colorado, I would have wished that he would have just picked a specialty to kind of get that one thing, because again, it's going to be really hard to do it in the NFL. Not to say that he
Yeah.
can't do it, but at this point, and I've been saying this for most of this offseason and draft process, I don't think Travis Hunter is the best corner in this draft. I don't think he's the best wide receiver in this draft. So when you listen to most draft experts, they say he's going to go either 2, 3, or 4. Like, chances are, if you are drafting Travis Hunter, it's going to be at one of those 3 positions. And the only reason we're not considering him at pick number 1 is because at this point, Cam Ward is basically a lock to go to the Titans. And if you sit back and think about players at either wide receiver or corner being drafted in the top 5, you have special players. Like, the last corner that I remember being drafted in the top 5 was Devin Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon is a phenomenal corner in the NFL. Travis Hunter isn't Devin Witherspoon coming out of Illinois. Like, Devin Witherspoon was that guy. Now, he hasn't gotten to the peak of where Devin Witherspoon should be at that position, but that's fine. He's still, I think he's only going into year 3 as a corner in the NFL. So, there's still going to be time there. Then you look at the wide receiver spot. He's not a Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not a Malik Neighbors. Hell, he wasn't even a Romo Dunze coming out last year. And then you just look at the other guys that have been drafted. Like, he's not Julio Jones. He's not Larry Fitzgerald. Like, these are guys that have been drafted at that position in the top 5. And you just go, if you are a team that drafts Travis Hunter, and you say to him, we want you to only play wide receiver or only want you to play corner, you are wasting a draft pick, in my opinion, because you're going to get a really good specialist, I think, on both sides of the ball. I think, again, like what you're saying, better corner than he is going to be a wide receiver. But ultimately, it's still one of those things you just sit back and go, you have to use him both ways to justify taking him at that spot. Because, again, I know there's a lot of people that say he's the best corner and the best wide receiver in the class. I don't follow that rhetoric. I think Will Johnson is the best corner in this class. I don't think anyone in the wide receiver group is all that special, but I'd probably give it to Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas. And you just kind of continue to sit back and go, if you don't use him at that 2-way, you're kind of wasting that in a sense of you're massively overdrafting a guy when realistically you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. If you're using one of those top picks on him, then you are drafting him to play both ways. And that's just where I feel like he's both helped and hurt himself.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that he stayed that 2-way, dynamic player, it elevated his draft stock immensely. He's going to get a bigger contract to start out as a rookie. He's going to, have more of a spotlight on him. He did those great things, but because he didn't specialize, it's hard to hone your craft at either one of those spots and really ensure yourself as considered one of the better or the best coming out of college at either of those positions. And that's where it hurt him. And I feel like it's going to be the same thing when he gets to the NFL, because you think about it, and in college, great, you're playing 2 ways. You're playing a lot of guys who aren't going to make it to the NFL, especially at that wide receiver corner spot. So you're guarding guys that aren't going to make the NFL as a corner. You're going up against corners that aren't going to make the NFL as wide receiver. And therefore, you don't necessarily have to be a master of the playbook. You can rely on your talent a lot more in college, where coaches basically go out there, cover that guy, do what you got to do. Don't worry about if you're supposed to be in this position for a cover 2 or for a cover 3 or whatever. Just cover your guy, or go run your route. That's sort of what it is. In the NFL, you're not going to get away with that as much. There's only been a very few special players that it's stated to them, look, go out there and you do you on defense. Don't worry about what the play's called. Troy Polamalu comes to mind for that, where it was like, yeah, you read the offense better than our offensive coordinator or our defensive coordinator. So if you see something, take care of it. You're not going to have that ability as much in the NFL. You're going to have to memorize and master both playbooks. You're going to be practicing on both sides of the ball. So you're going to be exhausted by the end of the week more so than any other player on your team, which means you're going to be going into the games with a little bit more fatigue than anybody else. It's just going to hinder him. And don't get me wrong, I'm excited to see it. Like I love the prospect of a guy playing both ways in a game, to be able to, say he goes to the Patriots and see him intercept a pass from Josh Allen and then on the very next play catch a touchdown pass from Drake May and just be that guy that does both those things. That'll be so fun to watch. I just my stance is just that he's hurting himself to really be able to put a stamp on his career and say that, hey, I was the best at doing this or the best at doing that. That being said, he very well is going to be the guy that when he retires is going to be, I was the best to play both sides of the ball.
I was the best two-way player in NFL history. And
right? Because there's only been like 4 of them, I think.
yeah, it's not a very high list. Like when you talk about the best two-way player in NFL history, the easiest answer is to sit back and go, well, it's Deion Sanders.
Yep.
And then probably the second best two-way player in NFL history is Devin Hester. And that's a very, very large gap because Devin Hester, when he was drafted out of Miami, he was drafted as a corner. And he got to Chicago and they were like, we don't really think that you're all that great as a corner.
Mhm.
So we're going to still play you as a corner. We're going to test it out. And then after his rookie year, they're like, you're too good to not have the ball in your hand. We're going to put you on offense. We're going to get you to play a little bit of wide receiver, maybe a little bit of running back. And, they just could never really find a solidified spot for him at that point. But yeah, it's by all means, I still going back to this conversation of like him probably should have picked a specialty this season. The reason why he won the Heisman Trophy was because he was a two-way player. I still don't think he should have won the Heisman Trophy. I think what Ashton Genty was doing was far and away more impressive and just insane to think about. But I'm really excited to see how he's going to go about this and how it's going to be handled in the NFL because at Colorado, it was basically like, hey, I'm out here. I'm on defense right now. Give me my defensive helmet. Okay, series is over. I come off for the punt play. I basically go grab a new helmet, run back out there with the offense, and he basically playing 125 plus plays a game. And at college, you play maybe 12 if you're just an average team. And if you're a really good team that makes the playoffs and goes all the way to the national championship, you might crack 16 games. Yeah. But that's a might. And we saw Travis Hunter get banged up a little bit throughout these seasons, and it's just not going to be sustainable. Because we listen to all NFL rookies talk after their rookie season and go, yeah, man, everyone talks about the rookie wall. You hit that like 13, 14 game mark and you're like, man, like I'm just beat up more than I've ever been. I'm more tired than I've ever been. Like it's just a completely different thing. And so this is why I have been saying for a while that when you draft Travis Hunter, you are going to play him both ways, but you need to kind of figure out the game which side he's going to play more because if like let's go with the Patriots for instance. If he gets drafted by the Patriots and he's going out there and playing Buffalo, well, he's not probably going to play both sides every single time because Josh Allen, he tries to go and tackle Josh Allen. There's a very big difference between Travis Hunter and Josh Allen in both size and weight. Travis Hunter could very easily lose that battle. And you don't really want your top weapon to necessarily be taking some of those really dangerous shots, especially when you have Christian Gonzalez and you paid a top corner in Carlton Davis to come over. So you look at that and go, hey, Travis, we know you really want to be a corner, but you're probably only going to get maybe like 10 snaps today, and we need you really focused on the wide receiver spot today. And vice versa. It could be a situation of where going up against Derek Carr and you're like, okay, we're not really worried about the Saints defense against you, so you're probably going to play more corner in this one. That's what it's going to have to be. there might be a few games where you see him doing a lot of both sides, but there's no chance in hell that he's
No.
going to be able to play as many snaps as he did at college, at Colorado, as he is in the NFL. It just simply won't happen. As much as I think Travis Hunter does the right things with his body, the training
Mhm.
wise and all this, it's it's the NFL, man. Like, you're going up against the best of the best of every single school out there.
Yeah, well, and like you said, we hear it from the rookies every year after the rookie season where they're like, wow, people weren't kidding when they said the speed is so much faster here. The physicality is so much harder here. Like it is. It's a different beast than playing in college where you're going up against guys that they're playing football, but their main goal is to get their degree and continue their career in whatever field they've chosen.
Yeah.
It's not every guy playing in college thinks or knows that they're going to have an NFL future because, 120 teams down to 32 teams. Like not everybody's making it.
Not only
And
that, but you have 100 players on a college roster.
yeah, as
That's a
opposed to
lot of
usually
numbers.
53 on an NFL roster. So,
Yeah.
63 if you include the practice squads. So, it's not it's not the same thing. And so I fully expect to see Travis Hunter deal with some injury issues in this first year. I hope none of them are serious. I hope it's just minor bangs and dings where he starts to realize that, hey, maybe I can't play every snap both ways every game. Maybe I do need to listen to my coach and let the coaching staff determine our plan of attack for each game. Because, like you said, yeah, up against the Bills, maybe you want him playing more on the wide receiver side because you want to be able to match that firepower that the Bills have. But then going up against the Jets, you go, okay, well, the Jets are the Jets. Maybe we want to stick him on defense and corner a little bit more because Justin Fields gets a little antsy back there and he might be able to pad those stats with some interceptions a little bit more against Justin Fields. So, that's where it really is going to have to be situational. And, like we're 100% in agreement. If any of these teams in the top 5 or even top 10, like say he falls out of that top 5, if he still goes top 10, you're drafting him to play both ways. If he's anywhere, in my opinion, inside the top 12, you're drafting him to play both ways. Once you get outside that top 12, we're going to see teams maybe trying to convince him. But as we said at the top of the program here, he stated this week, if you're drafting me and going to ask me to play one way, I'm more than happy to just retire instead.
Yeah. He didn't say retire. He says, I'm going to sit out.
Yeah, he said I won't play.
Yeah.
Yeah, which to me that is like like if you're a rookie and you pull that stunt, I don't know any teams that after 5 years or 4 years, if you don't take the option, are going to pick you up and give
He
you
would
the shot after.
he would get traded. Like, if he sat out for a year.
You, yeah,
Yeah. Well, like, here's the other thing with Travis Hunter. If he gets drafted by a team and doesn't sign a contract, he can re-enter the draft next
that's
season.
true.
And
That's true.
so we saw that happen last time. I think the biggest name that we saw ever happen with that was Bo Jackson when he was
Yeah,
drafted by, I want to say, the Falcons, or might have been the Jaguars. I can't fully remember. It was a long, I wasn't even born yet at that point, so I don't know. But then he basically said, no, it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that
yeah.
drafted Bo Jackson, and he said, don't draft me because I want to continue to play baseball for another year, and you've already stated that you're not going to allow me to play baseball. And he said, well, screw you guys, and never signed his contract. And then the next year, he was a 7th round pick to the Raiders. And, well, yeah.
Yeah,
So Travis Hunter could very easily do that sort of situation. And
that's
I
true.
don't think Travis Hunter would fall that far. Like, he wouldn't end up going like in the 7th round. He would still probably be like a 1st round pick. He can't go back to college. That's not something that he would be. But we've seen guys sit out for a year over that COVID stretch where we saw Penei Sewell sit out an entire season. We saw Jamar Chase sit out the entire season, and they
Mhm.
were still high up draft picks. I think he would probably slip outside of that top 10 in that
I,
scenario, but it would still.
yeah, I think he would slip out of the first round myself because I mean that COVID season is sort of an anomaly. There were a lot of guys that sat out. So there was a lot of guys that you saw that you didn't have a lot of film to watch and things like that. I think the issue now is if he were to pull something like that, ultimately what would happen is he's not going to be a focal point going into next
Yeah.
year's draft because we're going to have all this other talent that is performing.
No,
So I
totally.
do think he would fall out of the first round. I don't think he would fall all the way to 7 like Bo Jackson did, but I could definitely see him slip into 3 or 4 just because it's a year of you not playing the game.
Yep.
Like unless you come to Canada and play in the CFL for that season and then re-enter the draft, like that's the only way you truly retain your football form. Because we've seen guys before where it's, yeah, you can do whatever you want in the gym, on the practice field, whatever. You're not playing football.
Yeah.
And you can't condition to play without playing. You can do everything you want in the gym, on the practice field, in simulators, until you're out there wearing the pads, getting hit. It's
It's a
completely different.
completely different situation
Yeah.
for sure. Like I know what you're saying with that one,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see. I know you and I last week when we kind of went over a bunch of our questions that we asked, what's could be answered. I know when we were kind of building the list, one of the questions that you kind of wanted to throw out there was, we're interested to see what he's going to be announced as.
Yeah.
I think he's just gonna be announced as athlete Travis Hunter. I don't, or like it's either going to be athlete or cornerback and wide receiver out of Colorado, Travis. Like I think that's probably what it's
Well,
going to be.
yeah, and that's what he requested from Roger Goodell. He's like, when I get drafted, I want to be announced as cornerback and wide receiver.
Yeah.
Not one of those positions, both of those positions is what he had stated with Roger Goodell. And that was my question last week was, is Roger Goodell going to agree to this or not?
I don't see a reason why he wouldn't. Like
I don't
it,
see why not either, but I mean, it's Roger Goodell. He does some weird things sometimes. So
yeah, this is he is the best commissioner out of all the top 4 major sports in North America, in my opinion. You know, I know some people really dislike Roger Goodell. I'm not necessarily a fan of his. I like him a hell of a lot more than Rob Manfred of the MLB and Gary
yeah,
Bettman of the NHL. Don't even know who the basketballs is. He just looks like a. I'm not even going to say what I think he looks like because,
yep,
But regardless, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Travis Hunter. Some of the.
exactly. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting storylines at the early stages of that draft that we get to on Thursday. It's going to be interesting to see, is he going to be a Brown? Is he going to be a Patriot? I really think those are the two teams where it's one or the other. If the Browns don't take him, the Patriots will. I think that's what we're going to see happen.
Yeah, and we should say after we finish recording this one, we are going to record the final mock draft of the 2025 cycle. Again,
Mhm.
this will be another 3-round mock. We do have trades in it this time, so
Yep.
I know it. Obviously, I made the mock. Sterling still has yet to hear it. Make sure to tune in for that coming out round similar time, maybe a day before or a day after. Actually, a day after in this case. But one other player that I want to kind of talk about, and we've mentioned this before, but Shedeur Sanders is likely going to be the story of the first round just because he could go second to the Browns, he could go third to the Jets, he could go to the Raiders at 6, and if he doesn't go to the Saints at pick number 9, the question really boils down to, where is Shedeur going to go? Because obviously Bears aren't going to take him at 10.
Nope.
It's unlikely that the 49ers or Cowboys take it. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Cowboys do something insane and draft a Shedeur Sanders. It would be a hell of a shock to a lot of people, in my opinion, but I don't think that's where he's going to go. The next logical spot would likely be the Steelers at pick 21. But even then, you could have a team that trades up in the draft to try to go get it. Or maybe the Steelers just look at this and go, nah, we don't really want it. And we want to go after a defensive tackle. But the question is going to be, is once pick number 9 happens and it's not Shedeur Sanders, every single time a team is up on the board, it's going to be, well, do they need Shedeur Sanders? would they benefit from drafting him and sitting him for a year? Or, okay, well, maybe a team trades up with this team, and how far is this team willing to trade back? It is going to dominate. And honestly, I think that question is going to start after pick 4, or once we get to pick 4. Like, at that point, it's going to be who's going to draft him? Who's going to draft him?
100%. And that's just it. After pick, I'd say after pick 6 for myself with the Raiders, because I could still see the Raiders taking him, even though they've got Geno Smith for the next few years. That's still a very real possibility with Pete Carroll being there. After pick 6 for me, though, I look at it and it really is. It's the Saints at 9, the Cowboys are what, 12? 12. The Colts at pick 16 or 14, yeah. And then the Steelers at 21. Yep. Those are the 4 after that I see really having potential to take them. And 2 of those being the Saints and the Cowboys, I think we would see it be prefaced with a trade with the Steelers, most likely, where Derek Carr is being traded to the Steelers and then they're drafting Shedeur Sanders, or Dak Prescott being traded to the Steelers so they can draft Shedeur Sanders. That's really the only way I see those 2 teams truly going after him, because the Cowboys already made a trade for a quarterback, for number 2. So they don't need Shedeur at number 2. If they're taking him, he's going to be their number 1. And then the Colts, we did talk about this last week, where it's, do they take the gamble and go, yeah, we're going to bring Shedeur Sanders? Can you beat the 31st and the 32nd worst quarterbacks in the league for the starting job? And if you can, then great. Those guys will ship somewhere else.
Yep.
But other than that, it becomes a question of, does another team gamble with some of their draft capital or other talent on their team to trade back into the first round ahead of Pittsburgh to take him?
Yeah, and this ultimately kind of leads me into another kind of conversation with the Steelers. The Steelers, we kind of talked about them last week about this quarterback conversation, and there was also a handful of reports that TJ Watt is potentially looking for a trade out of Pittsburgh because he's in the final year of his deal. And the other conversation that ultimately kind of goes with that is, I'm sure Pittsburgh would be willing to offer TJ Watt any deal that he wants. I think they show that loyalty to a lot of their star players, and they would be able to get a deal done lickety split.
On defense, yeah.
Yes. But I also kind of look at this and go, TJ might be looking at the Steelers going, I know I'm going to retire a Steeler. I know that's going to happen. But it might just be time for me to leave if this team doesn't get the quarterback situation right. And we can't just have another Band-Aid type situation like what we've had essentially since the last year of Ben Roethlisberger. And that could be a situation of where we see the Steelers basically be told by TJ Watt, if you don't get us a quarterback that can compete or at least give us hope for the next couple of years, then you might as well just trade me. And that might force the Steelers to do a little bit of a desperation move and move up, maybe more than they would be willing to move up. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, Shedeur is going to be a massive story in that one. Again, talked about it last week. Shedeur Sanders had apparently a great interview with the Steelers at the Steelers facility. He said, described it as a 10 out of 10. So we'll just have to kind of continue to see how that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from what I've been seeing with TJ Watt, it wasn't so much an I want out. It was more of a, I understand this team is on the verge of a transitional period. And if you guys need me out, I am willing to listen to what you have to offer for that. I'm not going to be mad if you decide to trade me, basically is what it was. It wasn't so much an I want out, trade me. It was more of a, if you need to trade me, let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, obviously, with that Steelers team. Again, every single week we've talked about this Steelers situation of basically just us throwing our hands up in the air going like what are they going to do? Because even today with the Steelers roster, the way it's currently constructed, they're going to be a above 500 team. Like
Yeah.
they're likely going to win 9+ games. They're probably going to be the 7th seed in the wild card yet again, and then get bounced in the playoffs. Like this is the same story that we've talked about for what 6 years at this point with the Steelers, of where it's just going like, yep, you're right there. You're just going to be another. You're going to be an easy out for a team once they get to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And we've just been kind of waiting for that domino of that big change to ultimately fall with Pittsburgh, to see what ultimately happens with that. But again, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Shedeur, how that's going to affect certain teams. And
Mhm.
this also brings me to another player that I want to talk about, and that is Ashton Jeanty. Because everyone at the moment has just penciled in Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders at pick number 6. Now, it's a logical conclusion, because Ashton Jeanty is clearly the top running back in this class. The Raiders had the worst run attack last year in the NFL. They have a new head coach who, wherever he's been, he's really only been successful when he's had an elite running back to help his team out, and that being Pete Carroll. So this, like, it's a move that makes all the sense in the world for the Raiders to do. I'm not necessarily convinced that Ashton Jeanty is still going to be there at pick number 6.
Yeah.
And
No, I agree with that.
there's a team, and hell, after pick number 2, every single team in front of the Raiders,
Mhm.
you can make a very strong argument that they should take it. Again, you look at pick number 3, the New York Giants. What's one way the Giants organization can kind of lessen the blow of that famous clip of the owner walking into the GM's office saying, I would lose a lot of nights sleep if Saquon Barkley went to the Eagles, and that fiasco that was, if they just draft Ashton Jeanty and they have an insane season with Ashton Jeanty and Malik Neighbors, whoever the hell is going to play quarterback for them, whether it's Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston, and just have a lot of fun. But then you look at the Patriots and go, like, sure, they don't have that great of an offensive line, and Raheem Mostert, or not, who am I thinking?
Ramondre Stevenson.
Thank you, Ramondre Stevenson. He's not a bad back, but he's not Ashton Jeanty. That gives Drake May an elite playmaker to work with in the run game. You look at the Jags. No one's saying Travis Etienne is that talented of a back anymore. This year, we all kind of just sat back and went, man, this is really like the end. Like, it's almost like we saw Todd Gurley in his last year with the Rams this year
Yeah.
with Travis Etienne. Like, it was just like, man, like, it's just bad. New head coach coming in. Maybe we want to see him come in and get an elite running back. Like, there is, like, he might not even make it to the Raiders. I know that the conversation has been, oh, well, he's clearly going to make it to the Raiders, and if he doesn't,
No.
well, it's going to be Chicago. Like, and even then with the Browns, like, you can't sit back and tell me for a guarantee that the Cleveland Browns won't look at everything that's happened and don't have Nick Chubb anymore, and they could say, you know what? We still want an elite run game to compete in this AFC North. Let's draft Ashton Jeanty.
Well, that's exactly it. That's what I was going to say. We can't leave the number 2 pick out of there either, because really it's, do you trust Kenny Pickett to run that offense? Or would you rather have somebody he can just hand the ball off to? And as you mentioned, no more Nick Chubb. And so,
Well, it is going to
Ashton
be
Jeanty
Joe
makes sense.
Flacco starting.
Oh, did he
Yeah.
sign with? Yeah. Either way,
Yes.
41-year-old Joe Flacco, or however old he
I
is,
think he's
or
like
Kenny
38,
Pickett.
39. Yeah.
Either way, it's having a solid run game will go a long way.
Mhm.
Especially to slowing down the pace and allowing your defense to get rest before it has to go back out there and try to stop again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. Like, every one of those teams
You
before
can make
number
a
6,
strong
not
argument
including the
for him.
first overall, could take Jeanty. And there's a lot of teams behind number 6 that may go, we don't have to spend too much to swap picks from 8 or 9 to 5 and take Jeanty.
Yeah.
Just to get right ahead of the Raiders, knowing the Raiders will take him. And it would be a minimal cost for some of these teams to do that pick swap. You know, when you're in that 3, 4, 5 range, you don't have to give up a handful of top level picks. It's usually swap your firsts, give them a second this year or next year, and maybe a fourth or fifth as well. You know, it's not that expensive to move up from 8, 9, 10 into that 5, 4 or 5 range. So
It's
there's a.
really interesting. And
Mhm.
going back to this, like let's say for instance the Raiders don't take Ashton Genty. The Jets have been in conversations where they've said if we have Ashton Genty up on the board at 7, we will draft Ashton Genty and trade Brees Holloway. And then
Yep.
I don't think the Panthers will draft Ashton Genty because they re-signed Chuba Hubbard to a big-time deal. They drafted a kid in the second round last year. I think they're likely going to sit back and say that's not a situation we need. But you can't tell me that the Saints won't draft a guy like Ashton Genty. Kellen Moore, we saw what he did with a guy like Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara. Let's be honest here, even though he had a good start to the year, he wasn't like an elite player after that point. And yeah,
Yes,
it's
the problem with that, like the reason he fell off was because he was playing with that broken hand. He was the only player that team had was Alvin
yes.
Kamara.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the tough thing is both of those. I could see the Panthers doing a move like that because it's right in the Panthers' wheelhouse to make a weird pick. You know, and the Saints too. Like both of those teams, and even going back to the Patriots, any of them that decide, oh, we're going to go with Ashton Genty, then all of a sudden Stevenson, Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, like those guys are all then up on the trade block.
Yep.
Because you're not going to want those big contracts there with a top level running back rookie going to be playing ahead of them. You don't want your backup running back to have that kind of a deal. So it makes it very interesting because that, for a team like the Saints or the Panthers, that could be their path to get up to that number 4 or 5. Or even 3. You talk to the Giants, you talk to the Jags, and you go, hey, do you want Chuba Hubbard? Do you want Alvin Kamara?
Yep.
Things like that, just to move up and grab a guy like Ashton Genty. It's going to make it really interesting for sure.
I was listening to the Rich Eisen show a little bit earlier today, and one of the conversations he brought up was, what if the Cowboys were to trade up with the Cleveland Browns for not Ashton Genty, but for Travis Hunter? Like that would be a very Cowboys thing to do. No, I think if let's say the Cowboys do want to trade up and for either one of those two guys, it wouldn't shock me. But like they were talking about how if the Browns trade back to pick 12 with the Cowboys, that it would stop the draft, where it would simply be a situation where it's like, okay, like everyone, like, let's just take a few minutes to breathe, allow everyone to figure things out, because it's going to be interesting to see what this Cowboys team does. And that would be a very, very Cowboys thing to do, to trade up to pick number 2 to draft Travis Hunter.
Yep, 100% it would. But I could fully see them trading up to draft Ashton Genty as well.
Yeah,
Or
oh God,
I
yeah.
could see them trading up to draft Shedeur Sanders. Like that's the thing with the Cowboys is Jerry Jones trying to figure out what a crazy senile old man is gonna do. You might as well be rolling dice.
Yeah.
At the craps table rolling dice or playing roulette and just trying to hit. Like
You're trying to roll a D100 and trying to land 99 or 100.
yeah, exactly. Like it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, and the weird thing about this draft is that you look at the top, like you look at most of the mock drafts, and we're kind of moving away from the Cowboys and the Ashton Genty kind of talking that sort of thing, but when you look at a lot of the mock drafts, you kind of have a consensus top 5 where it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, and Will Campbell. Even then, like you have realistically like 4 guys that have mostly been in the conversation to be in that top 10 spot. But like this top 10, man, like you could see guys that are being mocked at like pick 30 ended up going into the top 10 because it's just one of those draft classes. Again, ever since the combine, it is the story of this class has been, this is not a stars class. This is a starters class, meaning that in the top 50, like you're going to have a guy that on some teams board at number 50 be on other teams boards at number 10 and vice
Yep.
versa. And so like it's just going to be absolutely insane. There's going to be so many random picks. Like again, I always like to say when I do my mock drafts, I try to go into the mind of the general manager for that team at that moment and what would be like, what are they trying to think about? I don't do mock drafts on base what I would do for, like, if I was the GM, I go what I think they will do. And even then, like this year, you're just sitting back going like, man, like again, you listen to the conversations of like the Jets. If Ashton Genty is there at 7, they're gonna draft Ashton Genty and trade Breece Hall. And I just go, that would be stupid. Like, why would you
Hmm.
do that? Like, why would you waste a draft pick on a position where you already have someone who's really good and young? Yeah, you're gonna have to pay him relatively soon, but that's a good problem to have.
Right? Yeah, I know it's crazy what some of these GMs do, and that's the hardest part is getting into their head to try and figure out what that team needs. And that's why with a starters class like this, you have so much disparity on each team's draft board because it really is going to be when each individual team comes up, what is their greatest position of need that they need a starter? You know, like what position do we need a guy that can play day one? What is the most important one? And for a lot of teams, that position will be different, but for some of them, it's going to be the same. And that's where you get the jockeying. And most of that is going to come from the defensive side, that D line. That's where teams need a guy that they can put in as a day one starter and where you're going to see the fighting. And so we talk a lot about Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty, but I would not be shocked to see one or two of these teams try to trade up to get a guy like Abdul Carter, just because he is so, so good.
Yeah, it's really weird because again, I've been on record to say that I still think Mason Graham is the best player in this draft. And I've been hearing people say like, oh well, he doesn't have that high of a ceiling. I go, well, I disagree with that. I think his ceiling is up there with being one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. And his
Yeah.
floor is really high at the moment, and this, that, and the other thing. But like, you'll have some people share my sentiment. You'll have some people say that, oh, his ceiling isn't that high, and you like even the good players in this class, you're still looking at going like, I like everyone has a different opinion on it.
Hmm.
It's absolutely crazy.
Which is pretty common with most drafts, really. You always get guys that everybody values a different aspect of a player's skill and build than everyone else. And so that's why you often will get some disagreements on where a guy's ceiling is going to be, where his floor is, whether he's worthy of a top 10 pick, things like that. But a lot of those opinions, they don't come from the GMs directly. It's usually scouts that aren't scouts anymore. They're in the media now, or it is analysts and things like that. It's the media people that are stating their opinions on it because that's what they're paid to do.
Yeah.
And we don't find out truly what the teams want until draft day because a lot of them they want to play that close to the vest because if for some reason you decide you're going to shift and you need to make a trade, you don't want the other teams knowing necessarily what your full game plan is because then they can exploit you in that trade and go, well, we know this is what you want to do, so we're going to offer you less now.
Yeah, it's obviously all teams right now are trying to keep their boards as close to the chest as possible. Again, we hear a lot of rumors that come out from front offices and that kind of stuff. Like again, at this point, we've already penciled in Cam Ward going first overall to the Tennessee Titans. That seems like it's a foregone conclusion. It seems like Travis Hunter to the Browns is also a foregone conclusion, and then we're
Hmm.
kind of just waiting at that point to see what happens after that. Because again, Abdul Carter to the Giants makes no sense to me. You have Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. Like, you
Yeah.
don't need to add a edge rusher like Abdul Carter into that mix. Now, it would make that edge rushing room insane, basically having that 3-man rotation, just going like, okay, on one play we're gonna have this guy here, this guy here. The next play we're gonna rotate this guy here. That guy goes off, and the other guy, like that would be an insane thing to deal with, like absolutely terrifying. But for a team like the Giants, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And this brings me to my next point is I look at a team like the Carolina Panthers. They're a team that improved this year. Without a doubt they did. They got a lot better and they showed improvement throughout all facets of the game. Bryce Young showed improvements. I am not someone that thinks that Bryce Young had this elite, amazing back end of the year that I keep hearing people say like, "Oh, Bryce Young was such an amazing player at the back half." I'm like guys, he really wasn't. Like let's pump the brakes on the Bryce Young was a great player this year. He was better than he was in his rookie season. Let's not glaze him and talk about him being a top 10 quarterback. I'm not saying that I've heard some people say he's a top 10 quarterback. I'm also not saying I haven't heard some fan bases, Panthers fans, say that he is, and then like just all that sort of stuff. I'm really interested to see what the Panthers are going to do at pick number 8 because they need wide receiver help. Like you need to give Bryce Young more help at that wide receiver spot because the kid that they drafted in the first round last year, Xavier Legette, he didn't really have that good of a year. He wasn't that effective. He had a couple of plays here and there, but he looked to be closer to like a Kevin White than he did a top end first round pick. And then you also look at their defense and go, well, if their defense was better, Panthers probably could have won a handful more games throughout that season. And so you need to kind of look at the best defensive player that they can get. And you just kind of sit back and go, it doesn't feel like there's really a good answer for the Panthers because we talk about the disparity in certain players. The edge rusher after Abdul Carter is no man's land. I personally think it's Mike Green from Marshall. But someone might say, oh, it's Jalen Walker from Georgia. Oh, it's so-and-so from so-and-so. Like,
Yep.
it's just going to be such a mad land. And then the wide receiver, it's like that's even worse because some people say it's Tet McMillan from Arizona. Some people like me say it's Matthew Golden. For all we know, it could be a dude in the second round, like Jack Beck is like gets drafted somehow in the top 10. Like it's such a crapshoot, man.
It is, and I mean, with that edge rusher D line, like yeah, after Abdul Carter, it drops off significantly, but there's still a lot of really good talent at that edge spot.
Oh,
Like
without a
we
doubt.
probably got 6 to 8 guys that are really good edge rushers that will be day one starters. So it's not like missing out on Abdul Carter. You miss out on a great edge rusher. It's just you miss out on a TJ Watt level, Micah Parsons level sort of guy.
Yeah.
That's what you're missing out on. And the thing with the Panthers too is you got to wonder if at this point they're finally a little more gun shy on trying to trade in drafts because they got so burned so badly throughout the last 3-4 years over the trades they made that they might just look at it and go, yeah, we could spend some to trade up to number 2 and get a guy like Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, but we're kind of scared too. And they should be. It hasn't worked out for them thus far. I think they'd be better off sticking where they are and just taking whatever is best available, likely on the defensive side of the ball. Because at number 8, I don't think a wide receiver is a wise pick. I don't feel like the talent is quite there in this class. So if they really want a wide receiver, then maybe trade back as the option for them. If that's what they want to do, trade back into the mid-teens and try to gather up some extra draft picks, something like that. But it would be wiser for them to just grab whatever the best defensive line edge player is available at that number 8 spot.
Yeah, I look at this Carolina Panthers team. To me, they are a prime candidate to trade back, and reason being is because chances are, let's say if you have Mike Green at your second best edge rusher, there's a decent chance where, let's say if you trade back with the Colts, I'm not saying the Colts have a real reason to trade up. Maybe I'm just using the Colts as a broad example. You can still get a really good guy there. Maybe the Steelers come sniffing at the Panthers and say, hey, we're going to try to trade up to draft a Shedeur Sanders because he's there and we want to get ahead of the New Orleans Saints. Like that is a possibility. And you moving back to pick 21, yeah, you're not getting a top 8 guy in this class, but like what we are saying beforehand is you could have a guy that on your board is a top 5 guy and still be there at pick 21. And so there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff that is ultimately going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. The Panthers, I could actually see being one of those teams because we see it every couple of years where a team does multiple trade downs just to stockpile picks. I could definitely see them, dropping from 8 to like 10 to 12 and then from 12 to like 17 and then 17 to 21. Like I could definitely see them just hopping all the way back in that first round going, look, there's nothing here that's worth this high of a pick. The guy we want is still going to be there. Let's keep gathering some more picks for next year and the year after so that we can put a proper team together in this NFC South.
You know what would be such a funny pick for the Panthers to make? Shedeur Sanders. Because
yeah, it would be.
Like last year we saw the Falcons just make the shock of the draft when at pick number 8 they drafted Michael Penix Jr. And it would just be hilarious to see the Panthers just go, we're not entirely convinced with Bryce Young, so we're gonna draft Shedeur Sanders and see who's better. Like
right.
that to me would just be hilarious. Like you will see me probably fall out of my chair laughing on draft night if that happens. Now, the odds of that actually happening, less than 1% in my opinion. I think the Panthers are smutting with Bryce Young.
Yeah, I think that's probably the lowest odds for the Panthers to do out of anything is picking a quarterback right there.
Yeah, which I think is hilarious. And this draft, man, is going to be so damn interesting just because, like, around this time last year, if you were to ask me to, like, go over the draft, I had a really good sense of who was kind of going where. Like, again, the draft board was Caleb 1, Jaden 2, Drake 3, and then you kind of get into that conversation of like, okay, well, who are the Cardinals going to take at 4? It's going to be a wide receiver, but which one of these highly talented receivers is it going to be? And it obviously went Marvin Harrison Jr. Then you wonder what was the Chargers going to do? Who was going to be Joe Alt or was going to be one of the receivers? Turned out to be Joe Alt. Like there was a lot of, you could just go down that line and go, this is what's going to happen here. This is what's going to happen here. This move's going to cause this move to happen here. And the biggest, shocker, again, was that Michael Penix move. This year, man, like we said it, it's going to be absolutely wild.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the difference in draft classes. Last year really was more of a star style of draft as opposed to the starter.
Yes.
And that's why we've seen the shift this year. It's rare you'll get the same thing 2 years in a row with those drafts. So, I mean, next year, who knows what we're going to see. And that's just it. I know people have already started looking towards next year's draft and stacking out the draft boards, but we did that last year with this year's draft. And I don't believe we had Cam Ward at the number 1 pick going for this year, and that's just it. It's so hard to do a year out what's going to happen, but there's always guys that do it.
Yeah, and again, like I know the week after, like next week's podcast will likely be a situation where we're talking a lot about the draft classes, and then the week after we'll probably have a segment on the 2026 NFL draft. Like,
yeah.
Again, when you talk about the NFL draft, it's always the second that it's done, okay, well, who's it going to be next year? And that sort of situation. But that's it for the podcast here today, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. Make sure to tune in this week for the 3-round mock draft as well. Check out all of our content. I know we also have baseball going on. Baseball season is in full effect, so make sure to check out our baseball podcast with DJ and Will. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying peace.